Tonight on Mid-Maryland Votes, we step into one of the most uncomfortable realities in our justice system, when mental health collides with cold-blooded violence. The Smithsburg workplace shooting left families shattered, and now the accused is deemed unfit to stand trial. So where does that leave justice? We're joined by Senator Paul Corderman, State's Attorney candidate Adam Grievel, and Angie Frey, a surviving spouse demanding answers. This is about accountability, consequences, and whether the system is working or failing. Now let's get into it. Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I'm your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And we are joined tonight by Senator Paul Corderman. Thank you, Senator, for being here. Adam Grievel, who is running for State's Attorney, and our very special guest, Angie Frey. Angie has gone through a traumatic couple of years dealing with workplace violence. And Angie, welcome to the program, and thank you for sharing with us. I know that grief is still part of your daily world. Thank you for being here.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So workplace violence and also the criminal justice system here in Maryland is the biggest topic that we want to discuss tonight. Angie, you had an incident where there was workplace violence that took your husband from you. Could you talk about that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief if I can. He left for work on the morning of June 9th. He worked at that machine shop for 25 years.
Oh, that's in Smithsburg, Maryland.
Yes, it is in Smithsburg.
Which is in Washington County, in the north of Washington County.
He had expressed to me in recent weeks that he was having problems with one of the people on his team, an individual who was driving here from West Virginia. He had relayed those problems to his management team there. Things were ignored by them. He was becoming very upset with having to go to work, and that was the first time in the 15 years that I knew him that he had ever expressed any lack of desire to go to work. He went to work sick, hurt back, stitches in his head, it didn't matter. He went to work. So just the fact that things were ignored, the signs were there. At my own employer, you know, we have to take courses every year on workplace violence, and from the courses that I've taken, this individual displayed all of the signs, the warning signs were there. So I just feel if they hadn't been neglected, that Mark, CJ, and Josh would still be here today.
So you brought up the fact, Angie, that there was two other victims, and they were co-workers of the person who was ultimately apprehended for the crime.
Correct.
The individual used a handgun, I believe, and actually wounded all three individuals in a break room at the facility. Is that where it was?
Yes, my husband was found on the floor in the break room.
And the other two also were deceased.
Correct.
And there were other people hurt as he was leaving the facility.
Yeah, there was an individual who escaped. He also had several gunshot wounds, but he managed to escape, and he was treated in the field outside the building.
And ultimately, the perpetrator in this case was caught and entered into the Maryland justice system, specifically out of Washington County, Maryland. Is that correct?
That is also correct. He was apprehended very quickly. There just happened to be an off-duty police officer in the vicinity and caught up with him on Mount Etna Road, which is a short distance from the machine shop where it happened.
And did he enter into a gunfight with the police officer, or he allowed himself to be taken into custody?
It's my understanding that shots were exchanged and he was wounded in the apprehension. He was put into an ambulance and taken to Meritus, where they put him in a room beside the other survivor.
He ended up at the hospital in the same room, lying beside the person that he had shot who had survived?
Yes, I believe that was told there was a curtain between them. I found out basically on Facebook what happened. My best friend works in Boonesboro. She drives through that area on her way home every night. Realized there was something going on at the shop. She called me. I was working. She said, "Are you sitting down?" And I mean, it's odd to begin with that she called. Usually I get a text message and nobody calls anymore. So I knew something was wrong. So I answered the phone, I'm like, "What's up?" And she said, "Answer something going on at Mark's shop." I said, "Well, let me call him." So he didn't answer the office phone. Nobody answered the office at the shop. So I got on Facebook. So I went there and people were talking already that it was the machine shop beside Mace Auto. So I got in the car, went out. They stopped me at the end of the road, wouldn't let me back. So I was there for quite a while. Nobody would tell me where Mark was, if he was even involved. I kept watching the bay door, waiting for a wave because he knew I'd worry. I started to realize that there were no ambulance. There were no emergency vehicles. So I'm like, where is he? So there was finally a gentleman came over and approached me, and he said, what's up? And I said, my husband's in there. And I said, he has some heart trouble. I have his medication. They said, well, I can't let you in, but I'll go see if we can find out anything. He came back a few minutes later. He said, all I can tell you is that he was involved. A friend showed up at the scene with me. They escorted us to the Smithsburg Fire Department. We waited and we waited. It was probably about 3 hours. And they were just getting ready to take us over to the church next door to let us know, the status of our loved ones. And I got a call from Columbia Machine in Washington State offering me condolences for the loss of my husband. So I didn't even have the benefit of a respectful presentation. I got a phone call. They were trying to cover their behinds. That's where my nightmare starts.
I'm so sorry you had to go through something like that, Angie. The unprofessionalism of that is crazy.
It was terrible. Terrible.
So, did they ever talk about the motive for this gentleman? What was his reason to shoot up his own work site?
No, there was no evidence of motivation. I do know that he had only been there for about 6 months when this all happened.
Mm-hmm.
I know he had issues, and in hindsight, I found out he had issues at Manitowoc. There was another machine shop that he was placed by the temp agency in Greencastle, had issues at all of them. I do know as well from conversations following the incident that he had questioned other workers and wanted to know if the country boys were part of the Ku Klux Klan. He had apparently surveilled my husband's truck. He had pictures of him on his phone as early back as March. And it would have probably been around the March-April timeframe when Mark started to express that he was having these problems at work.
The gentleman was from Texas. He was a Latino, and he was making allegations that people in the shop were part of racist groups. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
And your husband clearly was not part of a racist group.
Absolutely not. My husband is the poster boy for redneck. Mm-hmm. He loved to hunt. He was in the mountain all the time. We always teased him. His favorite color was camo. So it was very apparent that this boy had issues with the lifestyle that we led. And it followed suit. The other victims were all of the same cloth, all hunted, talked probably about their hunting and experiences at the break room. And they had mentioned to me when we had a meeting in November that they often tried to engage him, and he didn't want any parts of it.
Now, ultimately, Angie, this is several years ago, and the criminal justice system in Maryland has been dealing with this individual. What is your take on how they've been dealing with them, and are you satisfied?
I'm not satisfied at all, no, and I don't think they've dealt with him really at all. He's at Clifton T. Perkins.
Okay, that's the mental health facility for the Division of Correction in the state of Maryland.
That's correct. It's my understanding from when this all initially transpired that the public defender had him tested. He was tested to be competent, and that was relayed to me by a representative of the state's attorney's office. It was a few weeks later that we learned that public defender had left the public defender's office and took on a position at the state's attorney's office. There was a new public defender assigned, and she had the shooter reevaluated because of something that he said in her initial interview with him. So they found him competent, they redid it again, and then they said, oh, that's when all the NCR stuff started to pop up.
And NCR stands for, Adam?
Not criminally responsible.
Yeah.
Not criminally responsible,
Right.
Which means they can't try him. They can't continue the judicial process. Is that correct?
Not exactly. There's a difference between competent to stand trial, not criminally responsible. Competency has to do with your abilities today. You have to be able to understand what's going on now.
As you, as a candidate for state's attorney, of course, running against the current state's attorney who was responsible for this case, what are you seeing that happened after that has occurred and is problematic?
We call it the insanity plea, or used to call it the insanity plea. Today's modern language is not criminally responsible. When someone makes that plea, someone from the Maryland Department of Health will examine the person about whether they're criminally responsible or not. So if you're not criminally responsible, the law has no business punishing you. So if you're an infant or a 2-year-old and you dropped a hammer on your brother's toe, okay, you didn't commit an assault, you had no idea what was right or wrong. Okay, if you're severely mentally ill and require 24/7 care, we know we're not going to hold someone criminally responsible because they didn't have the moral culpability. When someone pleads and is found not criminally responsible, this is America. We don't hold people responsible for things that they didn't have any actual control over. And that's well settled precedent baked into our system of justice. So what happened here is the person pleads it, a state doctor gets the opportunity to evaluate them, but who gets to make the decision? The jury. The jury gets to decide.
Well, they should get the chance to decide.
Well, that's right. They're the ones who by law are vested with that power to make that decision. And if it's a question in dispute, it gets submitted to the jury. And whose burden is it to establish that they were not criminally responsible? The state has the burden of proof ultimately to prove they were guilty. And only once that person has been proven guilty, that is, that they committed the crime, but the defendant has to prove, preponderance of the evidence, to the jury that they couldn't control themselves or that they weren't sufficiently equipped to understand right from wrong.
We'll add that we did not get the opportunity to present any of this, but in front of a jury.
He had 33 counts. He murdered 3 people, shot and injured another coworker, shot and injured a state trooper. He committed other crimes on his way to the office that day. So he had 33 counts. He pled guilty to 7. The state conceded that he was not criminally responsible. Senator Corderman, you reached out to me, and Ms. Frye actually had reached out to my office at the time. The word being passed around was, well, he's schizophrenic, so that pretty much takes it out of our control. This is coming from the state's attorney's office on down.
Senator Corderman, and what was your general take of the situation at that point?
Well, I mean, the first takeaway, I think, as much as everyone in the community was of how horrific the incident was. And again, no one understands that more so than Angie and her family members and what she's experienced. And our office came into that point of one, just trying to provide support to the community, and then got engaged with Ms. Frye and all the tragedy that came upon her family. And then as we continue through this process as being described of how it ended up being, for lack of a better description, adjudicated or lack thereof, through this, NCR process. And I think the frustration that I felt, and I think it's a shared frustration with Angie and her family, and I think quite honestly, probably collectively on this call and other folks listening, is how this can come about and how this individual pleads NCR. As Adam laid out, there's a whole process that goes through, but there's other steps in the process that could have been taken that weren't taken. And I think that is, to me, is the frustration that I have. I think I don't want to speak for Angie, but I think she would agree to that the state never challenged that per se. The state's attorney's office just kind of took for what these doctors said, not for granted. I'm not questioning the competency of these individuals, these doctors, but it's their opinion. And everyone knows what an opinion is. I mean, and so that was never challenged. I think that was the concern. That has been my concern with this office over not just this case, but other cases of not, going that extra step, so to speak, when I think the community deserves that and the community expects that, and we need to make sure we're having the outcome that not just the family deserves and the victims that deserve, but the community deserves. And I just felt that has been lacking from this office. There's precedence. Look, just because an opinion is granted that an individual is NCR, that doesn't mean, that's nothing we can do about that. No, you challenge that, you question that, you challenge that, you present it to the jury, and you go through that process. And Ms. Frye, particularly in her family, were not afforded that opportunity. And I think that is, to me, continues to be one of the biggest issues from that process. And then continuing on, just, Angie has been tremendously strong throughout this over the years. She's come to Annapolis every year for the last 3 years as we have tried to reform NCR in a manner maybe more of an acceptable standard. But you see it all too often now, whether it's in our local papers or state papers, wherever, that this kind of page from the playbook of NCR is being pulled time and time again, they need to be challenged, and they're not being. And so, that's kind of, how I got involved in this, and will continue to be involved. And I've told Ms. Frye, as long as I'm in Annapolis, we'll go every single year and continue to fight this. And, I'm hopeful that with some new leadership in our state's attorney's office, and when these situations come up in the future, an opportunity to really get justice for not just the families, but the victims. And I think that's what's lost on here the biggest. I mean, the victims here, not just, Angie's husband, but other victims, to me, they were really dismissed. It was very sad and very frustrating.
If I could elaborate on that just a bit, the way that Senator Corderman got involved. We were at a meeting with the state's attorney's office, Christopher McCormick and Christine Remsburg.
Chris McCormick and Christine Remsburg are assistant state's attorneys.
Okay. So
But the other families were there too.
He became agitated with us because we were upset that they weren't doing enough. And that's when he started, if you don't like it, contact your lawmakers.
what state's attorney was this who said this to you?
Christopher McCormick.
And victim's family, his primary duty is to represent for you and represent for the state. And they're telling you basically, if you don't like it, stuff it.
I remember that, Angie. I remember that vividly.
I found Maryland.gov website. I emailed every email address on the Maryland.gov website. And I will sit here and honestly tell you that Senator Corderman's office are the only ones who responded.
Well, kudos to you, Senator Corderman.
And I'm not surprised to hear that. I think it's a fair statement to say that Senator Corderman has a reputation as being the most vocal politician in the area for lowering crime. And Senator Corderman, from your perspective, what is it that you want to be known and changed, and what steps have you taken as a result of this?
I got involved in it because I was just a horrific incident that happened, in our community and in our district that we represent. The shortcomings that happened throughout the process, and it was really, to me, a failure of action on the state's attorney's office to properly represent the victims here. And I think that has been, the biggest concern of, in this particular case. And there's other cases we've seen throughout the community over the years that there's been, similar issues, not in the NCR world per se, but just of not really going that extra step to support victims and to support, what the community, I think, would expect in some of these things. Because anyone you talk to will agree, regardless of your political ideology. We have found, even the folks that are on the other side of the aisle in Annapolis, when I talked about this case, this situation, this individual, as Adam said, killed 3 people, shot 2 others, wounded some, shot a state cop, whatever. She got a letter a couple months after the guy got sent to Perkins that he could be reevaluated for potential release. I mean, how on earth does someone kill multiple individuals, is sent to a mental health facility, and then has the opportunity for release? Now, we hope that would never happen, but the reality is it could happen. Every year, this individual can ask and petition for release. He can be evaluated any given year, depending on who he gets in front of or what conversations they have. That individual could be released, regardless if it's from a mental health facility, from a state correctional facility, anything. You murder folks, that's a line that you cross that you don't get to come back from. This increase of people pleading NCR because they know that. They know if they go through this path and then can be found competent, maybe a couple years, whatever, they can return back to society. And when you have situations like this, I mean, I don't think that's something that should be the way that it currently stands.
And there is a bill that you have put forward multiple times to become a law in regards to this situation, from what I understand. Can you explain what it is?
Yeah, like I said, we've done the 3 different years, different variations of it, extent of having the time that you would have to be committed if you're found in NCR to match the same sentencing guidelines of whatever the charge was, or having a minimum or base level. Because like, this individual killed 3 people, so you think he should be out in a year? Oh no, okay, well 2 years? No, I was like, well, okay, what's the line then? And no one will give you a definitive answer, but everyone agrees that no, if you're murdering people, you should not be back in society. Crazy or not crazy, whatever you're claiming, you shouldn't be back in society because you killed people. You killed multiple people.
Unfortunately, Senator Corderman, there is a political divide between how this society prosecutes criminals. And unfortunately, I think we're running right into that chasm right now here in the very super blue state of Maryland. How do you think that that's affecting it?
Yeah, well, there's no question. In Annapolis, we call it, California on the Bay. It's a race to see, how far left, we can go even of California to a certain extent. That's not to knock the folks in California, but I think everyone realizes and understands the political makeup of that state and the ideologies that come out of that. And to your point, yeah, it's a tough, the mindset of the majority of the state. Look, where we live in our part of the state, it's a little more conservative. I think it has a little bit more of a different, ideology and mindset. But make no mistake, the state of Maryland is deep blue, and they are not of the same like mind.
And Adam, there's multiple moving parts here. So from your area of expertise, what should the state's attorney's office have done instead? I mean, were their hands tied once the expert declared that this individual's NCR?
Yeah, I'm going to unpack this a little bit. When a guy pleads NCR, he has to be evaluated. State doctors, the Maryland Department of Health, will evaluate them. They'll make their opinion. That's all it is. It's an opinion. It's sometimes the opinion that wins. It's sometimes not. If they decide they don't believe he's NCR, the defendant can still go hire his own doctor and them evaluated, present an opinion to the jury that says he was NCR. And then they have a trial. The defendant's doctor testifies and the state's doctor testifies, and the jury decides, did he meet his burden of proof? And, the case rises or falls on that. When I dug into this very deeply, the thing that upset me was that the families were sent on, no disrespect, Senator Corderman, but a wild goose chase to the legislature. They were told, there's nothing we can do. Our hands are tied. The law is very clear. The doctors from the Department of Health make this determination. We can't appeal it. That was in an email to Senator Corderman from Gina Cerencian. It's false. All those things are false. They were told in multiple emails. They were told in person, there's nothing we can do. It's a lie, okay? It's wrong. It's false. It's incorrect. The law is actually very clear to the other direction. If the state Department of Health doctors determine that they believe he's NCR, that's just their opinion. That gets to go in front of a jury if the state executes the case. If they don't give him a plea bargain, they get to have a trial and let the jury decide. As America, have decided the jury gets to decide that. There were two cases very recently, one in Baltimore City and one in Charles County, I think, where they were strikingly similar. The crimes were actually less severe. One guy stabbed and killed his dad, I believe, and another one shot and killed somebody. Both of them pleaded NCR. Both of them were found to be schizophrenic, just like this guy. Both of them were examined by two doctors at Perkins, the Maryland Department of Health, and two doctors for each of them decided they were NCR, identical to this situation. And the state's attorneys in those jurisdictions, both Democrats, by the way, decided, no, I would like another opinion. They requested the court for authorization to engage an independent expert to evaluate the person. And in both of those cases, the independent expert rendered an opinion that they were criminally responsible. And so they had trial. And the defendants and the defense attorneys used the state doctors as their witnesses, the Perkins MDH doctors. And the state's attorneys used the independent doctors, and they had a trial. And the jury in both cases did not believe the state doctors. And they determined that the person was culpable and should be convicted. It's false that there's nothing we can do. And what really grinds me is that I believe I got this email from you, Angie. You were carpet bombing the world to see if somebody could help you.
I've apologized for that a lot.
Don't
But
apologize, Angie. You're representing your husband.
Right. And unfortunately, you couldn't get the attention of the only person that mattered. This is why this thing matters for this election. This is why it matters for the community. Fortunately, state's attorneys' terms are only 4 years. So you're getting married to whoever you choose, but not for that long. You can pick a new one, okay? And the only person in the world who had the power to do something different was Gina Cerencian. It's her job. And for her to tell the victims, there's nothing we can do, go talk to the legislature. The law's been like this forever. And then when the legislature reaches out to her and she says, oh, the law is very clear. The doctors at MDH make these decisions. It's not appealable. That's just false. The doctors they make an opinion. The jury makes a decision. and it can be appealed. She just totally misstated the law to a senator and then sent them on this, well, go change the law. Angie, you're very motivated. Let's go. Why don't you go work with Senator Corderman, try to change the law? No, what needed to be changed was the decision of the person in charge, the only person who had any power to do anything about this at all. That's what needed to be changed. All that person had to do was say, let's see what someone else has to say about it. Or the state's attorney had said, I've examined this. The evidence is very compelling. I know this is very hard for you to not see justice happen, but I'm the one in charge. I'm the one who's been vested with this authority. I'm not going to fight this because I've reviewed it and I do believe that this man was not morally culpable for what he did. I can do something, but I'm not going to, okay? If she had done that, the family still might have been very dissatisfied, but they would have known whose fault it was or whose responsibility it was, who had to make that decision. To deflect and lie and say there's nothing we can do is just wrong. Maybe one way to reform the law is to allow the victims to request, just a simple allow the victim to submit a request to the court to authorize or order an independent evaluation. If state's attorney is about to throw in the towel, then you can at least try to make a bid to the judge. Let's move to the secondary part. Okay, the possibility that this guy could be released. That's bad. And this is why I call it a wild goose chase, because Senator Corderman and Angie have been addressing the backside of it, because that's where she is right now. She's on the backside of this. They've been found not morally culpable. And they're trying to find ways to keep this guy away from us for as long as possible, because we know he committed a horrible crime. But you don't have to fight that fight if you fight the first fight. Every year, maybe about 4 people are committed for NCR around the state. A lot of people plead NCR and then they end up abandoning that position later in the litigation and they get some other plea. Of the cases that go to trial on NCR, most of them lose. Most of the defendants lose their bid to prove they were NCR. There are going to be cases, the evidence is overwhelming that the person was NCR, and as unsatisfying as it might be, it is the prosecutor's responsibility to say, look, I know you want vengeance, justice, whatever, but I'm not going to have a trial. I'm not going to waste the resources. This guy was clearly not responsible. First of all, if that's the case, you own it as the prosecutor. You own that decision. This was not that case. There was plenty of evidence of preparation, of premeditation, of advanced planning for how he would carry this out.
It was very deliberate. I understand from police reports that he had sent out some Snapchat messages to people asking if they were related to my husband. At some point, he Googled my husband's name, Googled him. He had pictures of our vehicles. With him doing all that research, and Mark and I having been a married couple together for 15 years, so I don't feel safe either. I mean, it's been close to 4 years at this point. From what we've learned with Senator Corderman's office from the Maryland Health Department, these individuals spend less on average of, I think it was 9.9 years.
Yep, less than 10 years.
Less than 20 days after they put him in Clifton T. Perkins. He was given the opportunity for his 30-day review.
That is the trick bag that they put you in by not prosecuting this case.
He waited for his friend Manny to leave early that day for some kind of medical appointment that he had. After he shot my husband and the others, he took the time at some point between the time he shot and the time he was apprehended, sent the balance of his bank account to his sister.
And essentially, Angie, what you're describing is a clear pattern of obvious premeditation. Can someone who has snapped, can you really have done that if you are that premeditated even up until the moment of walking in?
Said nothing set him off that day. He supposedly had a performance review that day, but management denied to the police that that review took place. But he did tell the prior owner of the shop that it took place. But just before their lunch break, apparently he had messed up a part and someone helped him with it. Nobody yelled at him. There was no scene. Everything was calm. So there was essentially nothing that set him off that day that we know of. We were told in November at our first initial meeting with the state's attorney's office, and they said, this is all a technicality. Don't worry about it. We have enough evidence on him. But if he pleads this insanity thing, that we have enough to dispute it.
Who made that statement to you?
The investigators from Washington County.
The detectives with the Washington County Police.
Yes.
And to Senator Corderman's point, 21% of individuals who are institutionalized with schizophrenia are considered to have, quote, recovered. Essentially, what it is there's about a 1 in 5 chance that this individual could be let go sometime in 2030. And that has got to be obviously terrifying for you and all the victims' families. What I think it also speaks to is just the growth in our state, particularly over the last 15 years, of permissiveness of crime. And we've all seen it. I mean, we've talked about it with many experts on this podcast all over the state, the growth in crime and violent crime. And I guess, Senator Corderman, from your perspective, do you have an explanation yourself, any kind of a take on what the rationale is from the supermajority, as it's called, the supermajority of Democrats in Annapolis that continue to pass these laws, even as violence and crime continues to increase?
It's a question that myself and other colleagues, the minority party, ask ourselves each and every day. We have a board in our caucus room in Annapolis that says, "I told you so." And we write things down on that, unfortunately, almost every year on these bills that they pass, regardless of what they are, whether we're talking about crime or any other type of policy. Because generally, most times on the "I told you so" board, when we come back to it a year or two from now, of how completely sideways things have gone. The unfortunate reality is the majority party is not of the same like mind, like I said, and quite frankly, they don't believe in locking people up and holding people accountable. I think that's just the bottom line. Look, I think we all live in a society that we believe that individuals, we believe in the second chance per se. We believe in rehabilitation. We believe in reentry to society. Murder is not one of those. Rape is not one of those. Crimes of violence against children is not one of those. You do those things, you've crossed that line. I'm sorry. You've crossed that line. You don't get to come back. To me, that's the way that I feel. And I think the folks that I represent, the majority of them feel, at least in our part of the state. The reality is the majority of our state and the central part of the state don't feel that way. And so you continue to see these policies that come out each and every year. Look, make no mistake about it. Annapolis does not make it easy for our law enforcement personnel or folks in our state's attorney's office. At the same time, it is a big incumbent on our local law enforcement entities and our local state's attorney's offices to find those opportunities, those abilities to still do the job that is necessary in a manner that our local citizens that we represent expect. And I think this is a prime example. And Adam spoke about it earlier. When this all went down years ago and Angie reached out to us, I'm not an attorney, right? Yes, I'm a state senator. That doesn't give me a law degree. I don't know what the exact process and the steps were. And so I had those same questions, I think, that we're all questioning here today. And there was that proverbial fork in the road at that time. And the state's attorney's office, in my mind, chose to take it, the easy way out, so to speak, for them. They didn't want to go through the ordeals of a trial. They didn't want to go through all that process. And quite frankly, they weren't, they weren't honest. I think Adam's right. They weren't honest with their answers to not just myself, but to Angie, because we asked that same question. I asked Gina straight up. I said, this can't be the way this goes down. Like this cannot be, there has to be something we can do. And again, we were told repeatedly, as Angie was, of, our hands are tied. This is what it is. And, there's an expectation of not just myself as a state senator, but as a citizen, and Angie and her family and any victim's family, that the state's attorney's office is the representation of the people. And they're the ones that are supposed to be giving us that knowledge and that guidance and really looking out for us. And just it obvious to me, and I think it's obvious from this conversation, I think everyone that's listening and watching it, that's not what happened in this situation. And unfortunately, we've seen a repeated pattern, that has come out of the state's attorney's office the last couple of years, and this particular instance and some others. So, and Adam very clearly and articulately laid it out. There was plenty of opportunities. The state's attorney chose not to take them. And to that, that therein lies the rub in the issue.
Well, gentlemen, and Angie, we really appreciate you guys being here tonight. Angie, you're going to get the last word, though. As the victim's wife, as somebody who's watching the criminal justice system do an injustice to you and your family, what would you like to have come out of this?
So I would like my husband to not have died in vain. Something needs to happen. The criminals are being coddled. They are not being held accountable. And there's going to be more. We don't live in a society anymore where you can go to work or you can go to a concert or any place that you can expect to be safe. And there's no consequences. Until there are consequences, this is going to continue to happen. And I just want to thank both of these gentlemen. Senator Corderman has been there from the start and has been nothing but wonderful to us and respectful. I've just recently met Adam, and he made me cry. It's the first time that I've seen anybody put it in black and white what we have felt for 3.5, 4 years, just to validate what we had thought all along. And I just want to say, too, that if it happens to anybody else in Washington County, I hope that Adam is there instead of the current staff, because we were treated absolutely horribly. There was no respect. There was no dignity.
No basic empathy or
Nothing.
compassion.
Nothing. We were met with nothing but smugness and rude comments. I have emails where one of the attorneys even said, you know, she's just not going to stop. This is out of control. So I just want to thank these two men, and I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to bring this to the forefront.
Well, Angie, thank you, because your grief, definitely is evident, and what you went through is abysmal. And prayerfully, there'll be a better outcome in the future for you.
Thank you.
Hey, Mark, I just want to add one thing real quick, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I apologize. You want to give Angie the last word
Paul,
there, but I think what she said there is important. And I think as we go through this election cycle and you start to hear from different folks, I think we should talk about the experience. Experience matters. And I think the experience that Angie had with this state's attorney's office is very evident. That's not the experience that the community expects. And when you hear people say that experience matters, I think it needs to be very well noted here that this experience is not the standard that we accept here as this community. And when you see these things happen, you really got to say enough is enough, and you got to move forward in another direction. So again, I can't thank Angie enough for her strength over these last couple of years, and we'll continue to be there with her as we continue to move forward. The experience that this family experienced and that other victims are experiencing is not the experience that we want to have here in Washington County. And so I look forward to having another conversation with you guys in the future, and appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening.
Well, thank you for being here. This has been Mark Flynn for Mid-Maryland Votes. With me, as always, is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
and we thank our guests, Angie Frey, Paul Corderman, and Adam Grievel, for being with us tonight. We'll see you next time on Mid-Maryland Votes. Justice delayed isn't just a phrase, it's a reality families are forced to live with every day. When the system shifts from prosecution to treatment, the question remains, who answers for the loss? Our thanks to Senator Corderman, Adam Grievel, and Angie Frey for stepping into a conversation that too many avoid. Like, follow, and share for more content like this. Mid-Maryland Votes on Facebook and YouTube. If you love the episode, share it with a friend. If you hated it, share it with an enemy. We're equal opportunity entertainment.